All right, let's go. All right, let's go.
We're live, CG. Curtis Garrett back in the house. Ship Talkers, got you back on. Just got back, well, 2 trips ago, just got back from your wonderful ULTL event. And might I say, I did have to skip last year's, but it was really cool coming from the event. You had to like scramble, move to Arlington, right? And like really get that done, which was a great event. But it was nice to really come back and experience it the way that you originally had visioned and planned. Like right there, it was a beautiful setup, an area, nice classroom style. So I thought it was, in my opinion, way better than what we had in Arlington because you were prepared and that was your vision. And I loved it.
Yeah. Glad to hear it, man. That means a lot. We try to incrementally get a little better every event, but I felt like this event was maybe a couple steps. A lot of it was just, it was overwhelming, not only the number of people, but the quality of people, you know, that took time out of their schedules, came in and hang out. I heard somebody say it felt like an LTL retreat kind of thing, which is exactly, I've always used the analogy. It's like getting dropped off at LTL summer camp for 2 days and we're all together, you're with your cabin, but I like retreat is maybe a little more eloquent. So that's a good way to put it, but yeah, glad you and Alex came. And here we are. I get 2 Bobby doses in 2 weeks. That's it's always a good time.
That's a heaping dose. That's why you'll probably stay away for like another 3 weeks and kind of reset.
It's a hero dose. But
I do love that one of the cool things about the event was just the overall networking, right? Whether you're there from the 3PL side of life, the asset-based LTL carrier side of life, or you might be a tech provider, or we had folks that were doing a lot of Mexico business with LTL that were curious about it, right? We had a very diverse landscape. When I say we, you did, I just got to show up. But I thought it was awesome, and it was definitely much different than a lot of events I've attended in the past, right? Some events are so big that you kind of get drowned out, and it's hard to connect with everybody. And while we had 110 there, I still felt it was pretty intimate, even for 110, and got to talk to just about everybody. So
yeah, a lot of that is by design. Like if we zoom out, really, if you look at supply chain events in general, there's not a lot that are focused on LTL. So I've been to Manifest several times, you know, TIA, like all these other larger events. LTL is typically one little piece of real estate, maybe one panel, one session. There might be LTL folks kind of mingling and in the crowd, but you're really, you know, you're diluted compared to the truckload crowd or just other warehousing, things like that. So that's somebody else made a comment to me, you know, her day-to-day is in a big truckload brokerage and she's on a small LTL team. And she just was like, it's cool to be with my people, you know, and kind of have this concentrated focus on LTL as a business, as an industry. And then we deliberately go content first. And I think that, you know, all of this is really an experiment and we will try anything that makes sense. And so we do slowly evolve things, hopefully for the better every time. But what's working is content first, not networking first. And the content and kind of the inclusivity of everybody engaged and in the room becomes the, you know, the dog, what's the saying? The tail that wags the dog, essentially, instead of putting it networking first. I think when it's networking first, which definitely has its time and place as well, but then it's so easy to get into these little like cliques and groups and who's got a meeting with who and who snagged the dinner meeting for this carrier first. And, you know, again, time and place for that. And you've obviously got to sit down and talk business with only your partners across the table at times, for sure. But yeah, I love that. Just anybody new or old to the industry, you know, we had Webb Estes in that room. We had people that were 2-3 months into the industry. We're all kind of together and everyone feels heard. Anyone can raise their hand, ask a question, push back, debate. agree, whatever. And it's pretty well received. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I was actually really impressed with Webb's presentation there. He's a super sharp guy, and you might think he may be a little bit of an introvert, but he was very well spoken and delivered a really good presentation that I believe he was the keynote, right, and opened that up. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool as he kind of went through that and what they're focused on. And what I love the most out of kind of what he said was we as an industry and even called out Estes, as an opportunity. How do we make the experience frictionless? How do we break down some of those barriers to make it easier to do business with us? And I really love that premise.
Yeah, absolutely. He was on point. He had a, well prepared. We actually had one or two prep calls with him before, just so we could share kind of the lay of the land and, the format of there's going to be some questions or there's going to be some Q&A and discussion. He came out and delivered, exactly what we asked for. And I agree. Like anytime you see somebody running a company of that size, admit that things are, there is some unnecessary friction or things are not quite where they should be. That's pretty hopeful and encouraging to hear. And obviously it'll take time, to kind of waterfall those initiatives. And it just takes time when you have tens of thousands of people working for a single company, but it's good to know that that's known at the top. One of the things he said that I remembered was he actually showed a picture of himself, like just getting dunked on a dunk tank. And he gave a hot tip. He's like, hey, if you order this brand and model, if you buy 200 plus, you get this amount off. And he basically alluded to the fact that they had gone out and ordered a dunk tank for every terminal in their network. And I don't know if he was joking about this or not, but he said he had told all his terminal managers, like, if you don't get up there and get dunked by your team, your people, then you don't really have a place here. Because, a leader has to show humility and humor. And it was just little nuggets like that. He went through the history, he kind of did. He really, in the same talk, he covered what would be like the corporate kind of polished version of Estes, but then went quickly into, the culture, what it really means to not only lead a company like that, but help lead an industry when you're one of the major players in that. The fact that, they focus on just loving freight internally at Estes. The other thing that was interesting, he talked about how, like, with the company being started several generations above him, from his great grandfather all the way down to his dad, Rob Estes, and now him, they all kind of had their areas that they were really plugged into. Yeah. And when he was coming up in the company, Rob Estes, his father, basically said, I've never really gotten into the maintenance and equipment side of things. That's maybe something you should dig into. And fast forward however many years, if you go to an Estes dock today and walk into their trailers, they've got some equipment upgrades and some, pretty innovative things in there, just with the captive beam systems, with the, the webbing or the grating that they stick in between to make for better strapping scenarios. And didn't he say they like co-developed a larger lift gate as well?
Yeah, it was.
On all the trailers?
Yeah, they had the drive.
So that's cool to me. Is like when you're so plugged into the business that you're working on and developing and coming out with like better hardware to serve your customers at the same time and just make things flow more efficiently internally. That's pretty cool.
Well, my favorite thing that actually came out of that, and I believe he said this, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think he said he had a CDL early on and actually did some level of driving, which I love, right? Because let's be honest, like if my dad had owned a $1 billion company, the largest privately held LTL carrier, I might just be a trust fund brat. I may be running around on a beach somewhere, never wanting to work. But I love how glued he is. He's like, no, this is my family's legacy, and I'm going to take that torch from Dad, and I'm going to take it to the next level. And that is something that I can respect the hell out of, and I love it. And I think it's good. Good for LTL, good for Estes, good for everybody all around.
Yeah, and the times we're in now, like if you look at Estes and R&L and, even Old Dominion being, they are a public company, but they have those strong family origin, roots to their culture. As time goes on and we do just have these, pure play, like financial machines, public company, really just not to say they don't, they're not only optimizing for share price, but it's definitely a big slice of what they're doing. It'll just be interesting to see how the look and feel and customer experience at the end of the day evolves. But yeah, big thanks to Webb. It was a great season. We had Kevin Mastio that same day talking about, Mastio rankings, and that was cool to hear, because I think my partner John Collins said it best. He spent time at Old Dominion like I did, like you did, but we all hear about these Mastio rankings, and it's kind of like topical or top of mind knowledge, but not many of us, and even myself, like really understood when you go deep into it and the specific questions that shippers are being asked, and some of the results that come out of those surveys, which might be counterintuitive, when customers are grading their experience and what's important to them. It was really cool to hear that.
Well, the price competitive one is the one that blew everybody's mind. They're like, what do you mean this is number 8? This should be number 1, right?
Yeah.
And no, everything goes back to loyalty and trust and just basically relentless execution of the basics. Just do what you say you're going to do. So I love that really kind of shook the room up. Now, selfishly, I've heard him do this song and dance before, so I was just waiting for him to hit that high note. But it was pretty cool. So overall, great event. Anybody out there who hasn't attended, I encourage you to go and check that out. Now, here's what I'm curious about, Curtis, and you can talk more about the event if you want, but what's up with that T-shirt, bro? You got the Tetris blocks on it. We got Lateral going on. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So we realized that, when I jumped out on my own in early 24 and left my last full-time role, my plan was I had a lot of problems I was focused on solving. And I thought at that time it would look like kind of this portfolio of different products and services. And I'm kind of, I'm not a formal branding guru or designer by any means, but I kind of nerd out on that stuff and understand and appreciate the power that a good brand, it can set you up and take you so much further down the path just with a solid name and logo and message and something that's easy to understand. So that's kind of the way I started out. We had Rate Hero focused on the pricing side. We had ShipTest, which is an LTL routing focused product, ULTL kind of in the middle. And I just realized through a lot of conversations with people, it was just becoming too confusing. So that was one part of it. The other part was the Rate Hero and the ShipTest, two kind of ends of the barbell. There was a ton of overlap and handshaking in the middle, where one example, you can, as we're building this RFP technology and the ability to streamline, facilitate, analyze an RFP in the LTL world, you can get as fancy as you want in that realm. But like coming out of that, if you don't have a way to actually govern and run compliance on carrier awards and routing guides and who you're giving, what business to, then all of that was kind of pointless in the first place. And it just exists, digitally or on paper or whatever. So in the last 6 months, it was, the mission was kind of becoming clear. So we decided to just smash them both together. So Rate Hero and ShipTest as individual companies and brands do not exist anymore. It's all under Lateral routing and Lateral pricing. And yeah, we're really excited. Something you actually said to me a few months ago really was key in this, this messaging and developing or hardening our mission as well, was that so many shippers and brokers just fire off shipment data and pictures and just all this information in various formats. And they're doing it obviously through email, and they're kind of using the carriers as like an RFP API. Yep. Except there is no RFP API. So that's what really the most simplistic analogy that I am using now is that we are setting out to build an LTL freight specific RFP API. that will streamline and format and basically serve up all the information and assets and data needed exactly how each individual carrier wants them. And then coming out of that, just increased visibility on, awards and compliance and tracking live shipment data going forward, so that you don't sit down, 4 or 5 months after the RFP closed and your carrier has to ask you, so remember that business you said, was coming our way? Where is that now? Or what happened to that? So just really trying to streamline and make the whole process more efficient. I designed this logo really to show kind of LTL as the acronym. It's kind of a backwards L turned around there. But then also a table, with 2 seats on either side. So we're setting out to build a better table to manage LTL commercial activities and deals, essentially.
Well, to me, I see the Tetris blocks, and all you're doing is piecing it all together. So their workload goes like it's piling up, and then it goes reduction, and I got data, right?
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. You're absolutely right. And I think that was one of the things that came out of your event, especially when Todd Poland and Sean Galloway were doing theirs. They came across that subject of the bids, right? And how overwhelmed they become. And they stand up full departments to manage 3PLs and treat them like VARs, right? Like value-added resellers. But there's a lot that's coming in. It's not normalized. It's in all these different formats, as you alluded to. It's a lot of email. So what we have is a high-touch, high-time-to-task environment, right? Yep. And then you got to wonder the conversion on that, right? So it can be great. You're receiving all these bids like a contractor would, right? You go out there and bid them. However, if you are not getting the work, then all as you have done is become that bidder, right? Yeah. And so you don't want to waste too much effort there. And not to mention, if it's not normalized or uniformed in any standard, you're having to work a lot harder than you probably should.
And that impacts both sides. One side will gather their information that's kind of translated to them or their customers' native tongue, and they throw that heap of trash over the fence. And then the other side has to catch it, receive it, untangle, kind of translate it so it makes sense to their side. By the time they do that, if that's the carrier in that scenario, they price it, and then they send it back over in their format, and then the other side has to retranslate it. So it's like there's no centralized or standardized normalizing and translation layer in the middle. And to your point, carriers tend to get a lot of practice that they don't need, pricing opportunities where it just goes into the void and they never hear a beat back.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit, Curtis, on like why that's happening, right? Because what I think has happened is that problem has really scaled probably over the last 5 years. And this is my assumption. I'd love to hear yours if you have a different one. But I think the whole idea of a really good blanket rate style program, right? You don't really get those anymore. And I know carriers will give some carriers blankets, or some don't even give them out anymore. You just get density-based pricing, the same I could give a local shipper in my market. So if you were a newer 3PL that came up and you weren't one of the big boxes that grew up in the sweet heyday of being able to get that, right? They don't really issue those anymore, which if you're not going to issue what I would consider as blanket style pricing or generic pricing like that, then everything turns into custom one-off CSP. So now that if I'm a 3PL, emerging 3PL, I'm more of like a boutique managed services, maybe getting a little niche within certain verticals. But now what I've done is increase the amount of CSP because that kind of just generic blanket is not available, because it's not that great for the shipper or that great for the LTL carrier, right? So that's my assumption, is that the number of like bids they're getting is going up, because that environment is kind of changing as LTL, shipper, 3PL are evolving.
Yeah, I agree. And 5 to 7 years, I mean, definitely just the volatility we've seen since COVID and after. Anytime there's market swings on either side, you see more churn, you see kind of an uptick in pricing and bidding behavior. So that absolutely contributes to it. I think just in general, the way LTL bids are done is really just a carryover from the truckload world. And if you think about it, it's like a carrier it's kind of a blind bidding auction, like they're bidding on this whole package of opportunity. And at the end of the day, they don't really know what part or slice of that they're going to get, which clearly in the high, activity driven costing world that LTL carriers live in, it's pretty important to know if they're going to get, one pallet every time they bump the customer's dock or 8 pallets in order to share and distribute that cost. So yeah, we're trying to look at this with fresh eyes and really focus on the process. Like at the end of the day, I don't personally care who's got more pricing power and where the market is leaning, and that's for the carriers and the shippers and brokers to figure out. I think our role as Lateral now is just make the process itself better, make it so both sides have as much visibility and understanding as they can of the opportunities they're receiving, the pricing that the shipper or broker is receiving for that opportunity. And there's a long way to go. There's a lot of time and dollars wasted, just on managing this in the current way. And what that means is carriers have to react and they have to put in constraints. And that's where you see like they won't bid on a CSP opportunity in some cases unless it's above a certain dollar amount, or they just kind of shovel everybody to like, hey, yeah, just use the dynamic blanket for that. Because you're right. That's the days of negotiating these, sweetheart blanket programs with carriers that you can essentially resell and use for any shipper going anywhere. Those days are long gone. And that the playing field is a lot more even. So I think that's definitely contributed to the volume of RFPs. Todd Poland at the event said that, I forget the actual number, but it was something above 80% of all RFPs they receive come from 3PLs or brokers. So there's definitely kind of this hive of activity in that part of the LTL world. So yeah, we've got to work for it. But
to know of that 80%, how many of those 3PL bids in that 80% are coming from customers that carrier is already servicing directly? And so what you're doing is kind of ripping that away from them as opposed to it moving from 3PL to 3PL. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would be hyper curious in that.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of reminds me of something that came out of Kevin Huntsman's talk about Mastio at the event was, and I think the days of reckoning for brokers are here, and not all are going to survive for a lot of reasons in the next couple of years with AI and automation coming in and better, more accessible direct to shipper tools. I'm sure we can talk about the recent ruling that came down as well. But yeah, on this topic, what Kevin said was pricing competitiveness was only ranked seven or eight for importance as far as the LTL customer rating or ranking their carrier. And 80% of shippers surveyed said they don't want to change carriers. So if you look at that, you're like, okay, most don't want to just full scale, like swap out and bring in a whole new set of carriers, and pricing is 7 or 8 out of, I don't know how many, but several more service and performance based items above that. Your average, I would say, lower skilled LTL broker is really just selling on savings, price savings. And if you're doing a CSP, to achieve price savings, you have to swap out carriers, because no carrier in the market is going to, bid pricing to a 3PL where they're already plugged in direct and give that 3PL a better deal. It just doesn't happen. So in order to achieve those pricing and savings goals, you have to swap carriers, and 80% of shippers don't want to swap carriers. So the whole flywheel is just broken.
And that if I've got Curtis Garrett Express picking up every day, and he has for 3 years, and he delivers to about 80% of the same customers, they know your driver. They know the experience. They see those labels on the dock. And then when that changes, I don't care who you are. I've been in LTL long enough. I've been on the forklift. I've been in there. When you take on new business, you learn it, right? You learn how it's handled, how it's loaded, what's the stowability of it, how am I moving it? Because not all freight is created equally. The receivers aren't, the requirements aren't. So it's just the nature of learning. You got to go through the bell curve, and it always creates thrash. So yeah, I don't want to change that much. People in general don't want to change that much once they're comfortable.
For sure. That the learning curve on a new carrier operating or doing business with a new shipper is steep, and it takes time. And that local pickup and delivery driver is, I mean, I've said before, and I'll say it again, like probably the most key person in that whole equation, probably more so than the sales rep that's tied to the account, probably more so than, anybody back at the corporate office. Like that person is the face of the company to that shipper.
Well, I think overall, LTL is getting to a good spot. I know it's been rough the better half of 2 years, and I'm not going to be one that says, yeah, we're out of the freight recession, right? I still think it's a very tight market out there, but I think there's a couple like leading indicators, or if I was to go, the winds of change I feel are blowing in our direction a little bit, right? And I think some of that is the truckload market is finally changing, right? The spot rates are going back up. I think what you've seen with the cancellation of a lot of like H-1B visa drivers has taken some of those out of the market. You had this new court ruling that came down where 3PLs or brokers are going to have to be a lot more liable for the providers they're hiring to do the business in the event there's an incident that happens. And we all know this in any industry. I don't care what it is. I'll use an example of my cabin up in Prescott, Arizona. Well, it's in a fire zone. Go figure, it's in the forest. Well, you know what? There's been fires everywhere, California. And you know what? I got dropped by my provider, and it was super hard to find a new one. And you know what? It was 2x the cost. And there was nothing I could do about it, right? That same thing has the potential to happen in that 3PL environment. And if it gets more expensive, just like with anything, regardless of that happening, if truckload went through the roof and capacity was super tight, that volume will trickle back into LTL, right? We've always seen those larger volume LTLs when the spot market's low, it goes into truckload, maybe milk runs, or, if it's cheap enough, I don't care if I'm taking half the trailer. It's exclusive use and nobody touches it. Great modality. But I think with those changes, that's one of the things I'm seeing that I think will trickle in here. And the other thing that I saw, I think it was 4 consecutive months, the industrial manufacturing index was above 50, right? And if you go look at it like over the last year and a half, it was actually like in the 30s. It was kind of humming along. There might have been one peak at like 52. So anytime it's above 50 consecutive months is a good thing, because as we know, LTL is driven by heavy industrial manufacturing for the most part, right? Think HVAC, think auto parts, think oil and gas industry out there in Texas with the valves and pipe fittings, right? That's always been a place in LTL.
And I'm glad to hear that, because if you zoom out and look over the past 5-6 years, LTL volumes just as a industry have been in decline. We're sitting currently.
Webb say? Who said the tonnage thing?
Webb said it. I think Richard said it in your session with him, Richard Slater from Southeastern. I saw a chart this week that came out of the ATA meeting that was going on in Florida. And yeah, it's stark, like we're below pre-COVID LTL tonnage and revenue numbers.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about that, and like even when Webb was going over it, he goes, I don't really know why. I'm just telling you the numbers. I can't exactly speak to why the tonnage dropped. Part of me wonders if in the old model, and you'll totally get this, right? Are LTL carriers now more focused on cubing out the trailer instead of weighing it out? So, right, maybe like when that tonnage shift happened, there was more focus on the higher weight per shipments. But like even Todd Poland will tell you this. Like, let's say you're a safe company. I don't want your 6,000, 7,000 pound single unit safe. I want your 2,000 pound safe, and I'll take 5 of those, right? So part of me wonders, and I don't have access to the data, didn't look at it, but it made me curious after it came up at the summit, because you're right. Richard called me that morning when we were prepping for our seminar and was like talking about that. And then Webb, right, in his keynote opened with that. And I think everybody was really surprised by that. And I wish I knew it off the top of my head, but I've been traveling the last 3 weeks, and this isn't really a steel trap. Things go in and out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a good point with the cube out versus weight out. At the end of the day, space is what the carriers are selling, and not weight on the axles sort of thing. Like weight is just kind of a byproduct of selling space, but and that's that's what drives a lot of their internal metrics. It's been a decade or more since I was on an LTL cross dock as an employee. definitely looked at, average weight per trailer as well as cube, but cube is definitely more important to utilize that space, especially the upper quadrant of the trailer,
Yeah.
where a safe or metal steel piping and tubing going down to those Texas oil fields doesn't always do the trick from a cube perspective. And then part of me too is, so I think, obviously it makes sense that as parcel and truckload kind of shift, those markets swing and change on either side of LTL, there's always going to be that smaller shipment, spillover into the LTL world from parcel, and then the bigger volume shipments, like you mentioned, coming from truckload. That makes sense. But as far as just the overall decline, like there's not another mode of U.S. domestic transportation out there that can handle, the wide array of shipment types and formats and sizes and weights and delivery and service expectations, and run that through a network, which is the only way you can deal with moving 1 to 4 pallets efficiently around the country. You can't send that A to B. So I'm this is something I'm going to keep digging into, and I don't have all the answers right now either, but it is interesting. And I do hope, with some of these recent advancements on the truckload side of the industry, hopefully we do start seeing, some of that spillover come back our way.
Well, now that we kind of open this up and talk about it, another potential theory I have in general on this with that tonnage drop is, did consumer buying patterns change enough, right? Where in the older model, when we were so retail heavy, we walked into stores to buy things and the inventory was moving from LTL carrier to the store. As we're now, it could be just domiciled in a fulfillment center on a local truck that goes and delivers that to your house with more of a white glove style service, right? Because if you go back, even like white glove is really taken off, and more commodities are getting delivered to your house in an LTL environment. You're seeing more LTL carriers have to get hip to this, right? And like FedEx with their direct service. And every LTL carrier will perform a level of residential. I mean, I think Estes has like 8 different service types for residential, right? Leave at curb, bring in door, all this stuff. So part of me wonders too, if there's just a change in consumer buying habits that has moved that tonnage into more of like a cartage or warehouse fulfillment environment that used to touch LTL. I don't know. These are just things I've been curious about since he let that fun fact out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, just the materials, like it might have been Scooter, I forget who said this, but generally things are they're more plastic generated now, and stuff that used to be made out of metals or more expensive and harder to manufacture type materials might be lighter.
That's actually a good call, because raw material steel went through the roof during that period of time because of tariffs and everything. And so, I mean, if I'm a manufacturer, I'm going to look at alternative methodologies to produce a similar quality product with a different material.
So yeah, with the LTL classification scale the way it still is, and even accounting for the changes last year, being density driven in most cases now, like that's going to drop the average density of LTL freight and push up the class. So that'll contribute more to the cubing outside of trailer filling. But yeah, there's a lot of things that could be driving that. I think at the end of the day, the other thing I was going to mention too, the Amazon effect.
Oh yeah, I was going to talk about this because that's another 3PL scare, like 3PL fulfillment scare.
Yeah, but I mean, think about how many goods, general goods, that I just opened my front door again before I jumped on this call, and my oldest daughter's going off to college in a couple of months, and so there's like a box fan and a little fridge came yesterday, and like how many of this stuff routes through Amazon fulfillment centers and distribution networks that might have previously kind of just been dumped in the more of the general LTL market.
1,000% to at least go somewhere to a final delivery point.
But yeah, you were going to say, I think this whole topic of, and it's not in any way look out 3PLs are done, it's more of a just reality. There's like they're going to have to get better to survive, and I think a lot of them already know that, and they're investing in the right things at the right time. But yeah, there's going to be some level of culling, with the number of active relevant brokers in this country, and specifically those that are focused on the LTL side.
Shit, I might double down on that, and I might want to heavily partner with them and figure out how I sell their service if it can reduce cost into my customer network or the customers that need it, right? Great, you can service and provide it better. Well, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm going to focus on margin and reselling this on your behalf. And maybe there's partnerships that spawn out of that, right? To help them address the market and get to it at scale. Right? Because as big as Amazon is, right, you still got to scale that offering out. It's a new offering, and that all belongs to a lot of various fragmented 3PL fulfillment centers everywhere. There's some standalones that work in local cities. There's some that have warehouse and distribution across the country, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe somebody just races to the space and figures out how to better partner with them.
Yeah, I think partner is the key word. I think a lot of the traditional, LTL centric 3PLs that we see out there in the market today are going to have to get a lot more creative and flexible, and know that at the end of the day, it's, whoever owns the customer relationship generally drives everything that matters, right? But you can't just stay in your silo and kind of close the shutters and say, nah, we don't want to bring in this third-party service or integrate with this one. Like, we got it. You got to know your limitations. You got to pipe in the right dimensioning partner, the right, TMS. I mean, what you guys have, it's like a TMS is essentially your vehicle right now, but you have, one of the best, if not the best, closed digital workflow and digital process loop. And that's something that, very much could be attractive to other intermediaries to partner with at some point. Because that's an asset that you guys have.
But I will say, and everybody, you saw it in the market when Amazon put that news out, there was a lot of reaction, almost more than I thought was necessary, right? Like a reaction from the LTL carrier asset side. I thought that reaction would be more from the actual 3PL fulfillment industry.
I think Amazon has become our favorite thing to react to, and it almost doesn't matter what they would do or put out there. Like, you could have a story hit freight waves about the Amazon rainforest, and people would be like, "Oh, they're coming for us." Like, I think it's a little bit of that. But yeah, it is interesting to kind of to watch. And I've already had people reach out to me and say, like, hey, do you have an Amazon freight contact that I could speak to? And it's coming in whatever, way, shape, or form that looks like in 5 years. I'm not totally sure. And that's speaking specifically to the only thing I care about, which is the LTL world. But something's coming down the pipe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it would only make sense, right, that they just go, and we know, and the reason I say this is because we know how hard it is and how cost prohibitive it becomes to start a net new LTL carrier, industrial real estate, cross docks, all this stuff. But they definitely have the purse strings to say, hey, we've got a beautiful delivery execution network. Let's couple a beautiful pickup network onto this so I can get more of this freight across America picked up. And I mean, that would be like, it only makes sense that they do that eventually. Do I think it's going to happen this year? No, but I would imagine they're talking about it in those closed door meetings. I mean, it would make sense.
Yeah, and they are building out kind of that middle mile line haul cross-docking infrastructure as well.
Yeah.
There's a facility here near me in Greensboro that I think they're in an old Averett or Southeastern Freight Lines terminal, and they're running, a purely Amazon cross-docking operation. So yeah, they're kind of they've perfected the home delivery, which still is in the parcel world. They kind of took that part over, and now I just see it as they're slowly crawling upstream. And at some point, I mean, an Amazon truck might be backing into a manufacturer, distributor, and making pickups at scale as well. I'm sure it's coming.
I mean, I know if I was UPS parcel, I'd be a little freaked out because you're already seeing how it's impacting, the big boys in the parcel space. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, On a slightly related topic, and just talking about LTL, with other adjacent modes, and I don't know that we've dove into this too much in the past, but these companies, I won't say any names, but there's companies out there who believe they can come in and utilize consolidated truckload capacity with no cross docking, fewer touch points, fewer handlings of the freight, and kind of not only replicate but revolutionize LTL. And what I've seen happen typically is they show up to the scene with that message, hey, we're changing the game. But usually what happens is they kind of find their niche and settle down into, they might even own that little slice or that category, but it's usually something that the core LTL carriers don't mind giving up in the first place, whether it's larger like volume type LTL shipments that turn into multi-stop truckloads, whether it's more on the home delivery side. And so I got thinking about that, and this kind of ties in with like what Amazon might do that touches our industry. It is no mystery, and it's well known that LTL is typically high friction. Webb even said it, right? As we said earlier, there is some pain especially if you don't know the industry, whether it's on the pricing side, whether it's on, the actual live movement of the shipments, track, trace, visibility, invoicing, audit, whatever. There's pain there, of course. And we're all aware of that. But what these new entrants to the market are preaching, I don't think really solves that pain. I don't think it's a direct trade-off where, if my freight was just touched, a couple times on average less than it is, or if it just went A to B, or, it wasn't traveling through this network, this closed network with different terminals, service centers, what have you. I don't think that's really where the pain exists. I think the pain is on the flow of data and information, all the way up from
1,000%, Curtis, because the opportunity is already there. And as they get better at enabling technology, one, to their shippers, but two, at the ingestion of it, normalization of that data, it's going to start solving some of those network problems and gaps that exist today, just purely on the speed of information that you're receiving and the automation of it to go as that life cycle moves. That information needs to be downstream already, and it's got to be accurate, right? And I think as the data gets better, the network's going to self-improve automatically. And I think you will see a reduction in claims and, what I call doing weird things where like you have to drive past destination, go to Atlanta only to unload it and take it back the opposite direction, right? I think you're going to start to see a lot of network improvement.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at, is the more data that's higher quality, further upstream in the process only helps, it flows down and it only helps everybody from a pricing to invoicing side, but also, internally on a carrier planning and network level.
Yeah.
I guess I say all that to kind of continue our pondering here of Amazon. I mean, there is a real possibility they just come in, they, like an alien landing on Earth, they suck up the current state and they read, they see all the blueprints, and they could just get very good at LTL, in this form that we know it in, and or improve it. But I think if they come in with this wildly revolutionary, like, hey, by the time we're done with LTL, it's not even going to look the same. I don't know if that's the path.
Well, people have been trying to change this beautiful little industry for a long time. It just keeps motoring along.
There's this pesky little moat, it's truckload. I would say it is a commoditized industry. LTL, I think, is still a ways off because every carrier is so different with their nuances and equipment and capabilities. And it's the trick is, which hopefully we can help a little bit with, is showing those customers where they match up best and which carriers are, the best fit for their business. Cause it's not a one size fits all.
No. Yeah. And that's what you've seen every carrier. And I presented on this a little bit, but like every single carrier out there, for the most part, has kind of announced that I'm focused on a couple things. I want to do a better job at the localized market, what my field sellers attack and take care of. I need to make it easier to do business with. I've heard this across the board, whether it's an Estes, an XPO, a FedEx. And part of that easier to do business with, and they've all self-admitted it, is we need to do a better job with technology, whether that's our own website or anything else we give our shipper. We need to make sure that it's modern and it's built for them and built for what we need. Like they've all had a general plan around this.
Yeah, and Sai, I don't think you mentioned Sai. They've got a whole role carved out for customer experience. Lori Blaine,
that was even in my presentation. Sorry, Fritz, I forgot. We had you quoted. You were on there. You guys are focused on it.
Right. But no, it's impressive. It's exciting, that all these carriers are focused on that. I think it's a lot of things. It's a bit of the people, meaning the customers, I think are finally being heard. And some of this, like dealing with your LTL carrier that you do millions of dollars a year in business with, should not feel like dealing with the government. And so often it does. And I think that can be fixed. So yeah, it's Justin Bailey, who I shared a session with at the event. He reminds me, like, in whatever number of years, when essentially AI is talking to AI and making buying decisions and routing decisions, and however the future looks in our industry, it is going to come down to those that have the deepest, most enriched, most comprehensive data sets, that tell the story of their business and capabilities, and their customers' businesses are going to be light years ahead of the rest. So I feel like there's a bit of, fatigue almost of, like, we in this industry have been harping about better data for years now, but it's been kind of a broad, high level term. And I think it's time to get a little more practical, a little more specific. And start rolling.
Well, I mean, you're seeing technology is just being so much more prevalent, what you can do with it. I mean, look at what we're even doing with DockWare over there with Connor, right? Being able to literally take a picture of a sales order, a purchase order, a pick ticket, pull the information out of there, do a 360 snap of your freight, have a picture of it to send to your actual consignee, right? When it goes out with a tracking link, being able to get true DIMs that are ITEP certified and get that to the carrier. Like, you have an opportunity now to really partner with an LTL carrier, right? Everybody talks about a shipper of choice, be a partner. But from a shipper's end, you now have tools in front of you, and it doesn't have to just be from us. They're just out there in the marketplace. Right. And you can put this together, and I don't care if it's 20 shipments a month, you can still be that good shipper of choice. Right. Those tools are out there now. And the more shippers get their hands on this, you're right, that's where it's going to drive to that network effect to the carriers, because it's getting easier. I mean, I did a customer event yesterday, and we had one of the gals that was at this event. I think it was Stoller Industries. She had been with me for 6 years. And she was like, you know what? When I started labeling the freight for the carrier with the big pre-coded barcode on it that I get from your website, my driver was in and out of here in no time at all. And she goes, it's been that way forever. And I love it.
Yeah, that world where all a shipper really has to do, because they're focused on their business, their product, their customers, right? Freight should be an afterthought. All they have to do is pick and package the LTL freight in a manner that, is sufficient for the LTL ecosystem, i.e. it's not going to get damaged. Slap a big old label on there with all the information, and then the rest of us that are kind of, making things happen in this industry are just sucking that data off of their dock, is reading, and that's what DockWare can do. Read the labels, take dimensions of the freight. You get a scale in the equation, and we've all for years now been kind of pushing these shippers towards all of our portals. Well, you got to enter that data in there, and you got to make sure we don't want your weight from a SKU level. We want the final weight, as it's ready to load on the truck, and that's all true. But I think there's a bit of like manual data fatigue and just keeping all this stuff straight. So if we're near the point of just package it, wrap it up nice, like hand it over to me, slap a nice big label on there, which is easy enough to produce, and then we got it from here. We'll scan and ingest and orchestrate everything after that. That's definitely the way of the future.
Yeah, I think that's happening. We're here now. Like LTL is getting hit with tech everywhere, right? You can't even dodge it, and it's beautiful. It's a good thing, and I've wanted this for a long time, and I'm happy that it's finally getting to a much better place. The LTL carriers know about it. They're focused on it. The customers are starting to be aware of this. They're focused on it, right? And I just see everybody getting better with this while we're in the middle of the new industrial revolution with AI. So,
yeah, it's a lot going on.
Oh my God, too much going on, Curtis. But I think we covered a lot on this call so far, so I'm feeling good about it.
Yeah. I think that might be a good place to leave it, and maybe we come back in a few weeks and pick it up from there. But it was we hit the high points. I was going to say there's some days that I wish I was just driving a forklift back on the dock and turn the brain off.
Funny? This is how I know we're like we got that LTL blood in us, because it's kind of meditative for me. It's just like doing any form of manual labor where I don't have to think about anything. My brain is on autopilot with that. I know what I'm doing, and I'm thinking about nothing else. 100 bills a night. Let's go. Put me in the yard, goat. Let's clean that up. Let's prep it for outbound or inbound. Let's move, man.
Yeah. You get that short-term feedback loop going. You spend 20 minutes on a trailer. You sit back and admire what you built, all the freight that you worked in there. It is pretty satisfying. That LTL flow state, I think, exists on the dock more so than anywhere else.
Oh, 1,000%. And I always hijack the fastest Toyota. Give me the load lift. Give me the fast Toyota without the governor. I'm going.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, Curtis, it was awesome catching up again. I can't wait to get this one out. We're trying to bring more of these, as busy as Curtis and I are, but we're going to get more of these out there and get some more guests on.
That's right. I think I'll be in that studio in a few months as well, so we'll have to save a few good topics for then.
Bring it on down, brother. We might even have guests in here with us.
All right. Let's do it, man. Good seeing you.
All right. Good stuff.